Good evening, I'm Joel Labi in Hong Kong and welcome to ViuTV News. Coming up on The Late Show. Diplomats and business leaders meet face-to-face with the chief executive on controversial amendments to the extradition law. LegCo's security panel wraps up its final meeting on the extradition law amendments with clashes and again without the Justice Secretary. And Russian President Vladimir Putin rolls out the red carpet for Xi Jinping, who is paying a visit to Moscow. Good evening. The chief executive has met with dozens of consul generals and business leaders with the controversial extradition law amendments reportedly on the agenda. Representatives from the United States, UK, France and Germany were among those who attended the meetings at government headquarters. Many of those envoys have been vocal critics of changes to the extradition law, particularly the US consul, who has spoken out on more than one occasion, although Kurt Tong today said nothing more than that it was a useful briefing. Security Secretary John Lee and Justice Secretary Teresa Cheng were among top officials also in attendance. Well, while Cheng was locked in talks, her absence was noticed in the final Special Security Panel meeting on the extradition law amendments. The bill now charges ahead into its second reading next week. But as Diane To reports, while many questions were answered, plenty still linger.
The last Security Panel's special meeting on the fugitive bill ended in chaos. A number of pro-democracy lawmakers protested at Secretary for Security John Lee as he was leaving to demand the bill be scrapped. The scuffles reflect the controversy over the bill, which has essentially become a debate over how much the mainland's judicial system can be trusted to deliver fair outcomes. Today, the security chief pointed out mainland China is, in fact, in the top third of global judicial independence rankings published by the World Economic Forum.
China
scored 4.5, and other countries behind it include South Africa at 4.4, Spain at 4.1 and Thailand at 4.1.
His point was quickly shot down by questions on human rights.
You're saying how great China's ranking is in the World Economic Forum. I'm asking you about human rights. China is ranked 121 in protecting human rights.
Liberal Party's Felix Chung voiced the business sector's worries about the possibility of a suspect's assets being frozen when an extradition request is filed. How can they pay for legal costs then, he asked.
They can apply to the court to request appropriate funds for living or legal costs.
Even after all 5 special meetings, many questions linger. It didn't help that Secretary for Justice Teresa Cheng was absent for all but the first. The second reading of the bill will resume next week in the full council. But in another snag for the proposed amendments, the Law Society made a submission on the issue today, listing areas in the extradition regime that need a comprehensive review first. It added there should be an extensive consultation with stakeholders and the community. It also said the proposal has far-reaching implications and urged the government not to rush the legislative process. Diane To, ViuTV News.
Well, Hong Kong fugitives Ray Wong and Alan Lee have emerged in Berlin, taking a stand against the extradition bill. In a landmark case, the pair were granted asylum in Germany last May, but only revealed their moves last month. Now, they say the changes will damage Hong Kong's one country, two systems, as Anne Cheng explains.
It's the pair's first public appearance since Germany granted them landmark refugee protection status. Ray Wong and Alan Lee were invited to speak at a June 4th forum in Berlin, hosted by German politicians. The Mong Kok riot fugitives described Hong Kong's extradition law amendments as smashing the firewall between Hong Kong and the mainland, saying its passage would deal a blow to one country, two systems.
How dare the Hong Kong government agree to arrest and extradite their own citizens and visitors to a legal system where forced confession are normal and torture is common.
Lee warned the amendments may also damage Hong Kong's judicial system and economic development if businesses lose faith in the city. He added international support is key in helping Hong Kong's democratic development.
I think German government could also consider to abolish
the existing extradition bill, the treaty with Hong Kong government, in order to act as a safeguard of human rights.
While the pair received asylum last May, they only revealed their status last month to speak out against the extradition amendments. Wang and Li fled to Germany 2 years ago to avoid prosecution for their roles in the 2016 Fishball Revolution protests in Bangkok. The duo said they fled because the government charged them under the Public Order Ordinance, which is strongly criticized by the United Nations Human Rights Council as unjust. They added they did not have the help of any political groups there in their application for asylum. Both Beijing and Chief Executive Carrie Lam have criticized Germany's decision to grant the pair refugee protection. Li and Wang said they're given refugee living allowances and that they're looking to study in Germany to meet the conditions for extended residence there. They added they won't be pushing for Hong Kong independence for the time being, saying the city's problem right now is how to safeguard what remaining freedoms it has.
Beijing has confirmed its nomination of Hong Kong's former police chief to a United Nations crime-fighting body. Andy Tsang has been put forward to head up the UN's Office on Drugs and Crime, as well as a Director General posting in Vienna. China says it's determined to support the UN's work, but Tsang is a controversial figure here in the SAR, having drawn the ire of critics over his hardline stance against the umbrella movement protesters in 2014. Since April, Tsang has served as Vice Commissioner of the mainland's narcotics unit. Organisers of the annual Tiananmen crackdown commemorations are happy more young people showed up this year, making them hopeful that the fight for vindication can carry on. The Hong Kong Alliance's Lee Chuk-yan said on the radio today that the group raised a record $275 million in funds at last night's candlelit vigil. He put it down to the public feeling growing pressure from Beijing, giving them a sense of urgency to do more for Hong Kong. Meanwhile, Democratic Party lawmaker Al Nokin complained that police estimations of the event's turnout were unreliable. Organisers counted some 180,000 people, while police said 37,000. Police earlier told him the grass areas alone would hold 32,000 people, but all 6 football pitches and the grass area were filled last night. The medical firm accused of smuggling HPV vaccines into Hong Kong has filed for bankruptcy. AMH Medical Diagnostic Group has lodged papers and 2 of its directors have been arrested on suspicion of illegally importing medical products. A notice at its Jordan clinic explained that its proprietors are in legal trouble and its bank accounts frozen. It insisted the Gardasil cervical cancer vaccines were produced by US makers Merck Sharp and Dome and appropriately shipped to them and stored. It also said it is refunding some 2,000 customers a total of more than $100 million. OK, coming up next, the latest from the world of business. Well, there's more evidence of an economic slump in China on the back of the ongoing trade war. A private survey shows services activity grew at its slowest pace in 3 months in May, caused by some noticeable cooling in export sales. The Caixin Market Purchasing Managers Index fell to 52.7 in May, its lowest mark since February. The 50 mark is what separates growth from contraction. And now the biggest issue on the mainland is exports, with a slump in orders placed with services firms. Last week's official gauge was more upbeat, but both surveys do reveal that the sector, which China had hoped will cushion any slowdown, is facing slackening demand. Well, those numbers did not appear to have too much of an impact on regional markets today. The mainland's Shanghai Composite finished flat as gains in telecoms were offset by drops in healthcare stocks. Investors were also digesting comments from Xi Jinping in state media, where he has described China's economy as stable, healthy and well placed to meet all risks and challenges. Well, here in Hong Kong, the Hang Seng Index tracked up 0.5% to break its losing streak. Consumers and industrials were the big gainers. Now, a part of the reason for Hong Kong's market bounce was a dovish remark from the US Fed on interest rates. Its chairman has dropped hints about a potential cut to kickstart a slowing economy, as Conway Gittins explains.
Wall Street believes the case for the Federal Reserve's next move to be a rate cut is getting stronger by the day. Investors increasingly betting the Fed will lower its key interest rate as early as the upcoming meeting next month. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, in a speech Tuesday, did little to change that view.
I'd first like to say a word about recent developments involving trade negotiations and other matters. We do not know how or when these issues will be resolved. We are closely monitoring the implications of these developments for the U.S. economic outlook, and, as always, we will act as appropriate to sustain the expansion with a strong labor market and inflation near our symmetric 2% objective.
It's that phrase, act as appropriate, that has many Fed watchers believing the chairman has now left the door open for a rate cut. Fear of an economic slowdown has been steadily building as President Trump piles on possible tariffs on Mexican imports on top of those already imposed on Chinese-made goods. JPMorgan Chase predicts the Fed will have to cut rates twice this year to offset the impact of the tariffs on two of America's biggest trading partners. Barclays is even more concerned, warning the Fed will have to slash rates 3 times in 2019. If the Fed indeed follows suit, that would be a complete turnaround from policymakers' views at the start of the year, when the Fed was forecasting at least 2 rate hikes by December.
Well, the world's biggest firms are tallying up the potential cost of climate change, and the bill is pretty staggering. According to a new report, they're expecting to take a hit of almost $1 trillion. Julian Satterthwaite reports.
The world's biggest firms are totting up the cost of this kind of thing. Devastation wrought by a changing climate. And the bill could come to almost $1 trillion. The figure was calculated by British-based charity CDP. It has scoured data from 215 of the world's biggest companies. That includes Apple, Microsoft, Sony, Nestle and Unilever. In all, they're expecting $970 billion in extra costs due to climate change. Hotter temperatures, chaotic weather and taxes on greenhouse gas emissions among the factors. Corporate concern over global warming has grown in recent years. A spate of superstorms, floods, wildfires and other disasters has made it harder to ignore. Even big oil has noticed. Last year, Shell said it would commit to meeting goals set out in the Paris Climate Accord. It linked carbon reductions to executive pay. But some big firms might find upsides to a warmer planet. The companies surveyed by CDP see over $2 trillion in opportunities related to climate change. Everything from electric vehicles to renewable energy. Greens will hope that doesn't make them see global warming as a growth opportunity.
All right, time for a break, but do stay with us. Up next, a look at Donald Trump's UK visit, which wraps up with D-Day commemorations. That's next.
We're all looking for when the moment.
Now TV STEM 學習組合，一齊玩住學，享受學習嘅快樂。全新 Now TV STEM 學習組合帶嚟全方位體驗，有啟發創意嘅 STEM 電視節目，邊玩邊學嘅互動 App， 仲有12款親子教育玩具定期送到你屋企，月費都只係138蚊，即刻申請啦！
Tragedy strikes when you least expect it. A manhunt that lasts for years.
My son is gone.
Inside the mind of a desperate father.
I'll finish this myself.
When the search becomes an obsession. The nightmare. The pain. The reality.
To give someone hope can be a dangerous thing.
Despite the price, never let go of the truth.
I found something.
The Missing. Thursday night at 9:25 on ViuTV 6.
Who's changing the culture right now?
Keep up with the speed of culture. Every Friday, brand new exciting real-life stories.
Bring some type of change to the game.
From ordinary people to the biggest celebrities. For they are real, complex humans just like us.
The more I wrote, the better I kept getting at it.
Listen to them. Live with them.
I'm the greatest.
Delve into the lives of the incredible talents.
You're welcome.
Your weekly dose of inspiring stories. Friday night at 8:30 on ViuTV 6. Homicide detective Jane Rizzoli. Medical examiner Maura Isles. The two disparate gal-pal crime fighters from Boston. Join together to track down the culprit.
No, you don't. You stay together. I will blow his head off.
Solve the city's most complex, suspenseful and puzzling crimes. Your favorite series continues for another exciting season. Rizzoli and Isles, Saturday night at 9 on ViuTV 6. Making money out of nothing? That's the dream of many.
There's money to be made here.
Let Sarah Moore fulfill your dreams.
Interesting looking things in there.
With the 30 million tons of garbage we throw out every year.
I want to make them commercial, saleable and expensive.
And the help from elite designers and craftsmen.
All the potential.
Turning trash into real cash.
Isn't it amazing?
Money for Nothing Season 2. Sunday night at 8 on ViuTV 6.
Welcome back. Russian President Vladimir Putin has rolled out the red carpet for President Xi Jinping in Moscow. It comes as Beijing looks to boost ties with its neighbour in the face of mounting friction with the United States. Our mainland correspondent Samantha Vardas has details from Beijing.
Well, this will be the second time the two leaders have met in a matter of months since Vladimir Putin attended the Belt and Road Forum here in Beijing in April. And the bromance certainly appears to be going strong. Speaking to Russian media ahead of his trip, President Xi said that he cherished dearly their deep friendship, adding that since 2013 they've met nearly 30 times and that he keeps fond memories of each interaction. Now, China's state-run media, meanwhile, says the visit is set to be another highlight moment for relations and that the two leaders are expected to take the strategic partnership to a new level. Now, both sides are, of course, facing a difficult relationship with Washington right now. Moscow over alleged meddling in the 2016 election, while Beijing is at odds with the US over things like trade, Taiwan and the South China Sea. Now, Xi will be in Russia for 3 days. He'll be attending the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, which starts tomorrow. Away from that, though, if his previous trips to Russia are anything to go by, there may be some caviar and pancakes involved too.
North Korea is warning the United States that its patience is running thin and threatening the future of its summit agreement. Pyongyang is blaming Washington for undue pressure to denuclearise. According to state media, the agreement, signed nearly a year ago between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, could be at risk if the US keeps demanding it surrender its nuclear weapons. In a statement read on air, North Korea's foreign ministry bluntly warned there is a limit to our patience. It comes amid reports the North has punished those negotiating with the White House before February's failed summit. Well, speaking of the White House, US President Trump has joined the Queen, Theresa May, and world leaders in the coastal city of Portsmouth for D-Day commemorations. They're marking the 75th anniversary of the largest combined land, air and naval operation in history, a feat that ultimately helped bring World War II to an end. The Queen, Prince Charles, presidents and prime ministers rode to applaud veterans, their coats heavy with medals, as they stood on a giant stage beside a guard of honour. The service is one of the final items on Donald Trump's agenda as he wraps up his visit to the UK. Earlier, I spoke to our London correspondent, Nawir Jabakail, and asked how the president's trip had been viewed.
Yeah, that's right. Before he landed, he called London's Mayor Sadiq Khan a stone-cold loser, and he waded into the Brexit debate as well, suggesting Boris Johnson would make a great Prime Minister. But while he's been here on British soil, he's fairly much stuck to the script. Yes, he's been characteristic Donald Trump in brushing off those protests yesterday, as you mentioned, for example. But this trip has been fairly smooth and free of controversy, at least in Donald Trump terms. And I think he'll be seeing this as a huge success, partly because of the optics, too. A source of his said that he's someone who loves brands, and there are few brands bigger than the British royal family around the world, so he'll be aware of the potential impact this can have for him back home in the United States. And with the presidential election around the corner in 2020, that makes this trip all the more important.
The Vatican's former treasurer has faced an Australian court appealing against a sexual abuse conviction. Lawyers for George Pell, who was jailed for 6 years, say there is reasonable doubt in his guilty verdict. Ed Giles has the details.
Cardinal George Pell has returned to court to fight for the appeal of his sexual abuse conviction. The former Vatican treasurer was convicted to 6 years in jail in a Melbourne court last December on charges of sexually abusing 2 choir boys in the 1990s. The conviction made Pell the most senior Catholic in the world to be found guilty of child sex offences. And the case has divided Catholics worldwide. Pell's lawyers are arguing his appeal on a number of grounds. And if the court rules in his favour, the Cardinal could be released or face a retrial. Reuters' Sonali Paul was at the court.
Pell's lawyers are appealing this case on 3 grounds. The first is that the jury reached an unreasonable verdict based on all the evidence that was presented. And the second is that the judge was wrong to have blocked the defense from showing a video presentation which they were going to use in their closing argument. But the judge actually said that it was introducing a new piece of evidence and it looked like a reconstruction of the case rather than just a closing argument, something to bolster the closing argument. And the third ground that they are appealing on is that Pell was arraigned, or he actually made his not guilty plea not in the presence of the jury, but rather by video link, and they said that's a fundamental irregularity.
Pell remains a cardinal while awaiting the outcome of the appeal and can only be dismissed from the priesthood if he's found guilty under Vatican rules. The appeal will continue for a second day on Thursday, but a ruling could take